A windy evening. The dusty streets of the small town of Red River came to life to the sounds of the saloon, where a piano played and glasses clinked. But behind the cheerful noise, a cruel truth was hidden. The town was ruled by fear and brute force. At the center of this story was a young woman, Abigail Turner, 22 years old, with clear eyes and a proud look. She ran a small fabric shop. Her mother had died of an illness, and her father was killed while building the railroad. Abigail was left alone, but she didn't break. She worked, traded, helped the elderly, and wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. The Clayton brothers gang had long been in charge of Red River. The three Clayton brothers, the oldest, Derek Clayton, was not just rude, but truly cruel. The middle one, Earl, considered himself smart, but always hid behind his older brother's fists. And the youngest, Tommy, had not yet lost the last bits of his conscience, but he was too weak to stand up to his family. These men kept the town in fear. They collected taxes from farmers, humiliated women, and beat anyone who dared to talk back. The sheriff, old and tired of life, pretended that nothing was happening. Abigail became a bone in their throat. She didn't pay the taxes and openly said that the Claytons were thieves. The townspeople admired her courage, but no one supported her openly. Fear was stronger than justice. And then one evening, everything changed. The sun had dropped below the horizon. Abigail was closing her shop when the Clayton brothers walked onto the street. People hurriedly scattered to their homes, closing their shutters just to avoid being seen by them. "I see your shop is still standing," Derek said, coming closer. His steps were heavy, and his gaze was cold. "It will keep standing," Abigail answered calmly, without looking away. A crowd of onlookers gathered at the end of the street. Someone whispered, "Why is she arguing with them?" Someone else froze in fear. "You think you can challenge us?" Earl smirked. "In this town, we are the law, and you're just a girl without a family." Derek raised his hand and yanked the basket of fabrics from her. He threw it on the ground, crushing it with his boot. The people in the crowd gasped, but no one moved. "Today," he said loudly, "the whole town will see what happens to those who don't respect the Claytons. We will make you regret it. We will strip you of your dignity on this street, in front of everyone." His words sounded like a blow. Abigail paled, but she didn't let fear get the better of her. She straightened up and looked him straight in the eye. "You can only humiliate those who bow their heads," she said firmly. "I won't bow mine." The crowd stood frozen. The tension was unbearable. People felt that something irreversible was about to happen. But at that very moment, a man appeared from around the corner, in the shadows, tall, in a dark cloak, with a hat pulled low over his eyes. His steps were measured, and his gait was confident. On his hip, a revolver gleamed, worn with time, but well cared for. He walked closer and stopped, not saying a word. His gaze fell on the Claytons, and there was something in that look that sent a chill down the oldest brother's spine. "Who else has decided to interfere?" Derek asked hoarsely, turning to the stranger. The man took off his hat, and in the light of the lantern, his face was revealed tanned, with sharp features, his gaze as hard as stone. "My name is Jonathan Hayes," he said, "and if you want to take her dignity, you'll have to go through me first." This is how the story began that would turn the life of the entire town of Red River upside down. For the first time, Abigail felt she was not alone. The crowd held its breath. People, used to fear, for the first time saw a man who dared to say no to the Clayton brothers, and though no one yet knew what would happen next. That evening, in the heart of the town, a small spark of hope ignited for the first time in a long while. The crowd was silent. No one dared to move. Only the wind rustled the saloon sign, creaking in time with the tense silence. Jonathan Hayes stood directly in front of the Clayton brothers, without moving. His hand hung near the holster, but his fingers weren't trembling. "Who are you to get in our way?" Derek growled, stepping forward. "Someone who can shoot faster than you," Hayes answered calmly. These words hit the crowd harder than any gunshot. People exchanged glances. "Is he crazy?" 1 against 3. Earl burst out laughing. You're just a drifter. Decided to play hero. The graveyard is full of guys like you. Abigail stood behind him, her heart pounding like a drum. It was the first time she had heard this man's name, but his composure seemed to shield her from fear. Derek stepped closer. You think you can protect her? Then know this. In Red River, we write the laws. Hayes tilted his head, looking straight into the oldest Clayton's eyes. I've seen yours written by men like you, on bone and blood, and there was always someone who put a stop to it. Today it's my turn. The tension became unbearable. Suddenly, Derek reached for his revolver. The crowd gasped, but Hayes was faster. His hand flashed like lightning. Bang! The bullet clipped the edge of Derek's hat, knocking it to the ground. The next one won't be aimed at your hat, Jonathan said in an even voice. The crowd gasped. No one had ever dared to humiliate the Claytons, but this man had done it in an instant. Earl and Tommy froze. Even Derek, feeling the cool rush of the bullet by his temple, took a step back. His face was twisted with rage, but a flicker of fear appeared in his eyes. You'll regret this, stranger, he hissed. You don't stand a chance in this town. Hayes slowly lowered his revolver, not taking his eyes off them. I always have a chance as long as I have truth and bullets. The crowd began to whisper. For the first time, people saw that the Claytons could be stopped. Something long absent appeared on their faces. Hope. Abigail stepped closer to Hayes. Thank you, she whispered. He gave her a quick glance. Not me. Yourself. You held on in a way many men wouldn't have. She lowered her eyes, barely holding back tears. The Claytons, holding back their rage, left. Derek only yelled, "This isn't over yet." When their figures disappeared into the darkness, the crowd erupted. People whispered, exchanged glances. Some even cautiously smiled. For the first time in many years, someone in town had challenged the tyrants. Abigail looked at Hayes. Did you come here by chance? He thought for a second. I'm never in towns like this by chance. Night fell on Red River. The moon hung low, bathing the town in a dim light. As if watching every step, it seemed that darkness itself knew that blood would be spilled tonight. After the incident on the street, people didn't leave for a long time, discussing the stranger. Some considered him a madman, others a hero. But everyone understood the Claytons would not let this go unanswered. Jonathan Hayes was sitting in a small room at the hotel. His revolver lay on the table next to a worn flask and a packet of letters tied with an old belt. He was silently cleaning his weapon when a cautious knock sounded. Come in, he said calmly, without turning around. The door opened. Abigail stood on the threshold, in her hands a basket with bandages and a bottle of water. I thought maybe you would need this. Her voice was trembling, but her eyes shone with resolve. Thank you, Hayes nodded. But this isn't for me. It's for the town. She frowned. You want to stay and fight? What do you want me to do? He looked up. Leave and abandon you to them. Then my shot this afternoon would have meant nothing. Abigail bit her lip. A storm raged inside her. Fear, hope, and an inexplicable feeling associated with this man. Then know this, she said quietly. They're coming tonight. I heard the Claytons gathering their men at the barn outside of town. Hayes put the revolver back in the holster and put on his cloak. Then it's time to go and meet them. Night. The barn outside of town. The gang gathered at an abandoned barn. Torches burned in their hands. The barrels of rifles gleamed. The Clayton brothers stood in front. That stranger thinks he can mess with us, Derek growled. Tonight his blood will water the ground of Red River. Earl spat. Maybe we should break his legs first, so he knows whose name is law around here. The crowd laughed in approval, but the laughter abruptly died down when a hoarse voice came from the darkness. Good speech. It's just a shame you won't have anyone left to listen to it. Everyone turned around. Hayes was standing at the barn, alone. The moon lit up his figure. He moved slowly, confidently, as if he himself were choosing the moment of death for each of them. Kill him, Derek roared, and everything exploded. The shootout. The first shots lit up the night. Hayes dropped to the ground, rolling to the side, and the bullets only chipped splinters from the barn door. His return shot knocked the torch from one of Clayton's men's hands instantly. Part of the crowd was plunged into darkness. "Over there, to the left," Earl yelled, but Hayes moved as if dissolving into the darkness. His bullets hit their mark. One of the thugs fell. Another screamed, grabbing his shoulder. Derek was shooting, showering the barn walls with sparks, but Jonathan was always a step ahead. Suddenly, a torch fell into the hay at the entrance. The fire surged up like a wall, lighting up everything around. Now everyone could see everyone else. Hayes stood up to his full height. His eyes flashed in the flames. "You wanted blood. You got it." The turning point. One by one, Clayton's men fell, but the forces were uneven. There were more than a dozen of them, and they began to press him against the barn wall. At that moment, a clear shout rang out, "Jonathan!" Abigail. She had arrived on a wagon, holding her father's old rifle in her hands. The thunder of the shot echoed through the night. One of the thugs fell directly into the flames. "Get out of our town." Her voice rang with desperation and determination. This stunned the gang. A woman with a rifle next to the stranger. The crowd hesitated. Hayes took advantage of the delay. To quick shots and to more fell to the ground. Now Abigail was standing next to him. Their eyes met. He gave a short nod. "Strong. I knew it." The fire in the barn blazed until morning. The drywood crackled. Sparks flew into the sky, as if the night itself was trying to exhale the rage that had accumulated over many years. By morning, Red River had gathered at the site of the clash. Men, women, children, everyone was looking at the ashes. The bodies of Clayton's men lay in the dust. Horses, left without owners, snorted nervously by the roadside. He went out against them alone, and he's alive. Someone whispered. "No, not alone," an old cowboy objected. She was with him. All eyes turned to Abigail. She stood next to Hayes, her hair tangled, her face covered in soot, but she was still clutching the rifle in her hands. Someone said aloud for the first time in many years, "Maybe it's enough for us to live under the Clayton's boot." The crowd hummed. In those words was what the town had been lacking, a spark. At the hotel, Hayes didn't return to his room until noon. He sank wearily into a chair. Abigail brought him a basin of water and some bandages. "Give me your arm," she said, not tolerating objections. He wanted to refuse, but he saw the blood on his sleeve. The bullet had only grazed his shoulder, but the wound needed care. While she washed and bandaged it, he was silent. Her fingers were trembling, but her movements were cautious. "You know they'll come back again now," he finally said. "I know," Abigail answered quietly. "But the town saw it too. People are afraid, but yesterday, they saw that it is possible to resist." He looked at her intently. "Last night, you changed a lot." She looked up. Their eyes met, and for a moment the noise of the town, the creaking of the floorboards, the murmur of voices outside the window disappeared. There was only this silence between them. At the sheriff's house, Sheriff Tom Riley was sitting at a table with a bottle of whiskey. His face was tired and grim. When Hayes entered, he looked up. "You did what I was afraid to do," he said. "But know this, the Claytons will be back, and not with a dozen men, but with everything they've got." "I understand that," Hayes nodded. "Then tell me, stranger," the sheriff poured himself another one, "what did you get involved in this for? This isn't your town." Jonathan was silent. "Maybe I'm tired of seeing people stay silent and endure. Maybe I want it to end somewhere." The sheriff smirked. "Either you're a fool or a hero, or maybe both." The Clayton family at the same time, far outside of town. At the Clayton estate, Derek and Earl were gathered at a large oak table. Their faces were distorted with rage. "He challenged us," Derek hissed, "and he'll know we won't forgive him. We'll gather everyone," Earl added. "We'll buy thugs. We'll bribe the lawman. This town will burn down with him." In a dark corner sat a woman, the Clayton's mother. Her grey hair was neatly styled, but her gaze was full of steel. "Do what you must," she said coldly. "But remember, if you lose again, don't come back." Morning in Red River was living a strange life. On the one hand, the usual rhythm merchants opened their shops. Cowboys drove cattle. Women hung out laundry to dry. But beneath this outward quiet, anxiety was bubbling. Everyone knew the Claytons wouldn't back down. People whispered to each other. When will they come? How many of them will there be? Will the town hold? And invariably, with every line, a new name was spoken. Hayes. At the hotel, Hayes was sitting by the window, watching the street. He saw children playing in the dust, old people carrying sacks of flour, women hurrying to church, and he understood. These people had lived in fear for too long. Abigail entered, carrying breakfast. I doubt you've eaten since yesterday. He nodded and took the cup of coffee. A few sips and the silence between them hung in the air again. They're afraid, she said, but a spark has appeared in their eyes. You lit it. He smirked, but a shadow flickered in his gaze. I've lit sparks before, and do you know what it all ended in? Ashes. But here, it could be different, Abigail objected. Here, you have us. He looked at her. He wanted to say something, but only looked down at his cup. The sheriff and his decision. Sheriff Riley gathered several men in his office. The Claytons will strike soon. I can't guarantee that we'll hold out, but if anyone is ready, we'll start preparing. Silence hung in the room. Finally, the old blacksmith raised his hand. I'll be there. I'm tired of living on my knees. A young farmer echoed him. Then the saloon owner. One by one, the men began to agree. The sheriff sighed. For the first time in many years, he saw that Red River wasn't just afraid, but ready to fight. Hayes passed that same evening. Jonathan went outside of town. He sat on the edge of a cliff, holding a stack of letters in his hands. The paper was old, the edges scorched. He read them silently. In each one a woman's handwriting. Warm words, hope, love. The last letter ended with trembling lines. Come back alive, Jonathan. I'm waiting. But he hadn't come back. Not then. And now she was no longer alive. Hayes squeezed the letter in his hand, and with his other hand, he ran it over the holster. Maybe this town is my last chance, he whispered to himself. The alarm. By midnight, a rider arrived in town, covered in dust. The Claytons, he breathed out. I saw their camp by the river. There are 24 men, and they're going to strike tomorrow night. The news spread through the streets like wildfire. Women began to pack their things. Children were crying. Men were grabbing their rifles. Abigail ran out of the house and found Hayes by the well. They're coming. What do we do? He looked at her calmly, but his voice was as hard as steel. Get ready. Tomorrow night, Red River will find out what it is, a town or the Claytons' shadow. The morning before the battle, the sun rose over Red River, painting the streets with a reddish light, as if foreboding the blood to come. The town woke up earlier than usual, not to roosters, but to fear. But the fear was different now, not paralyzing, but anxious, calling for action. On the main street, Sheriff Riley and Hayes were standing in front of the people. Everyone was gathered here. Merchants, cowboys, the blacksmith, even teenagers who wanted to hold rifles. Listen carefully, Hayes said, his voice as hard as steel. The Claytons will come at night. There are more of them, but that doesn't mean they're stronger. If we stick together, the town will hold out. He looked into the eyes of each person. Today we'll decide whose town this is. Theirs or yours. The people murmured in agreement. The preparation. The town got to work. The blacksmith forged iron bars to reinforce the doors. The women and elderly filled sacks with sand, from which barricades grew at the entrance to the town. The old church was turned into a shelter for the children. Even the boys found things to do. They carried water, brought ammunition. Hayes positioned people as if he had been doing it his whole life. He knew who could shoot, who was only good for backup, who could be a messenger. His calmness spread to the others. Jonathan, the sheriff, came up to him. How do you know all this? Hayes' gaze lingered for a moment. I've seen towns die before. I don't want Red River to be next. Meeting at the well in the evening. As the sun was setting, Abigail brought Hayes some water. He was sitting by the well, cleaning his revolver. You lead them as if you were born to do it, she said. He shook his head. I lead them because they have no other choice. And I have no life left to lose. Abigail sat down next to him. Her voice trembled. You don't have to do this for us. You're a stranger. Not anymore, he answered quietly. I'm already a part of this town, even if only for a little while. Their eyes met. In that silence, there was more than in any words. The storm is coming. When the sky darkened, the first lights appeared on the horizon. Dozens of torches, the sound of hooves and the murmur of voices could be heard. "They're coming," a boy yelled from the bell tower. The town instantly came alive. The men took their positions, the women led the children to the church, and the sharpshooters took up their places on the barricades. The sheriff wiped the sweat from his forehead with his hand. "God help us," and Hayes stood in the center of the street, drawing his revolver from the holster. His silhouette in the light of the torches seemed huge, unshakable. "Don't expect mercy," he said. "Tonight, we are the blacksmiths of our own freedom." The torches were approaching. The laughter and shouts of the Claytons' men could be heard. They felt like masters, confident that they would crush Red River. But the town was already different. The first shot's darkness thickened over Red River, but the torches of the Clayton gang lit the way to the town, as if it were a bonfire from hell. Dozens of riders surrounded the street. Horses neighed, rifles gleamed. "Forward!" Derek Clayton roared, raising his carbine. The thunder of gunshots tore through the night. Bullets hit the barricades. Splinters flew to the sides. The people in the town held their breath, and then a return volley hit from behind the sandbags. Rifles fired with a loud thud. Screams sliced through the air. The first of Clayton's men fell to the ground. The town had met the enemy. The barricades, the blacksmith, George, covered in soot and sweat, stood next to his sons. He reloaded his rifle so fast it was as if he had been doing it his whole life. "Hold the line," he yelled. "Don't let anyone through." But there were too many enemies. Under the pressure of the horses, the barricades began to sway. One of the thugs leapt onto a wagon, swinging his rifle butt, and suddenly a shot ripped through his chest. "Back!" Hayes yelled, appearing right in front of the attackers. His revolver was firing non-stop, every shot finding its target. The crowd slowed down. They saw in his eyes not fear, but cold calculation. The skirmish on the street, a second group burst in from the west. Now the fight raged along the entire street. Women threw burning lamps from the windows onto the heads of the bandits. Teenagers with rifles were shooting from the rooftops. Even the old preacher was standing at the church doors with a hunting shotgun, not letting the enemies get close to the children. The Claytons roared, overwhelming them with their numbers, but the town responded with desperate fire. Abigail was standing on the roof of the barn. Her hair was flying in the smoke, her father's old rifle in her hands. Every shot she took was accurate. She was covering those who were below. At one moment, one of the bandits noticed her and aimed. Abigail froze seconds, and it would all be over. But Hayes was fast enough. His bullet knocked the shooter off his horse. "Watch and learn," he yelled to her through the smoke. She responded only with a glance, firm, determined. The breakthrough when the night seemed endless. The bell rang. The teenager in the tower was ringing it with all his might. It was a signal. The enemies were flanking them. East Street. The sheriff yelled. Hayes rushed there alone. His silhouette dissolved into the smoke, and soon, isolated shots rang out. For a few minutes, no one knew if he was alive until the shooting in the alley stopped. And then Hayes came back out, limping, with a smoking revolver. "No one else is there," he said curtly, "but more will come soon." The flame one of the torches fell onto the barn roof. The fire instantly flared up, lighting up the entire street. Screams, smoke, the neighing of horses. Red River was turning into a burning hell. And in the midst of it all, Hayes stood, raising his revolver. "Derek, Earl," his voice rose above the noise. "You wanted the town. Then go and take it yourselves." The crowd parted, clearing the way. The Clayton brothers emerged from behind the torches, Derek with a smirk, Earl with a cold gaze. "Well, stranger," Derek said, "let's see whose hand is faster." The town fell silent. Everyone understood their fate was about to be decided. Silence before the shot. Red River was blazing. Smoke filled the streets, and the flames, like a bonfire, lit up the faces of the townspeople. Everyone stood frozen, holding their breath. Even the horses stopped neighing as if they understood that the hour of reckoning was upon them. The Clayton brothers stepped into the street. Derek massive, with burns on his cheek, a carbine in his hand. Earl cold and precise, like steel, holding his revolver low, ready for a lightning-fast shot. Hayes stepped out to meet them. His cloak was scorched, his face covered in soot, but his eyes were calm and hard. "It's simple," he said, stopping in the middle of the street. "If I fall, the town is yours. If you fall, Red River is free." No one answered. Seconds would decide everything. The beginning. Derek was the first to snap. With a furious roar, he raised his carbine. The shot split the night, but Hayes had already dived to the side. The bullet hit the wall of the saloon, scattering splinters. Hayes' return shot knocked the carbine from Derek's hands. The crowd gasped, but then Earl stepped forward, his revolver flashing in the flames. Hayes barely managed to roll away. The bullet grazed his shoulder, leaving a crimson streak. Blood dripped onto the ground, but he got up. His eyes were burning brighter than the fire around him. The dance of death. The duel turned into chaos. Shot after shot, step after step. Derek picked up a broken barrel and rushed into a hand-to-hand fight, but Hayes shot him in the leg, toppling him. Earl was shooting with cold precision, every bullet finding its target close to Jonathan's heart. Hayes moved like a shadow. His revolver sang a song of death, and every sound brought the climax closer. At some point, Earl found himself in the center of the street, directly opposite him. Smoke filled the space. Everything fell silent. "You're too late, stranger," Earl hissed. "This is our land." "No," Hayes replied, raising his revolver. "This is the land of those who live on it." And a shot rang out. The full Earl swayed, took 2 steps, and collapsed to the ground. His revolver slipped from his hand. The crowd held its breath. Derek, roaring, rushed at Hayes, clutching a knife. He was like a crazed bull, and it seemed nothing could stop him. But Jonathan stood firm. 1 step back, a sharp shot, and the knife fell to the ground, along with Derek's arm. A second shot and the giant collapsed, spread out on the dusty street. Silence. The victory. Hayes stood in the middle of the street, smoke rising from his revolver. Everything around him was burning, but for the townspeople, it was the light of freedom. Someone yelled out, "The Claytons are dead," and the crowd exploded with shouts, as if the entire town of Red River had breathed out at once. People hugged, some cried, some prayed. Abigail rushed to Hayes. She grabbed his hands, looking at his face. "You're wounded, alive," he answered curtly. "And that's enough." And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a smile. The morning after the fire, the sun rose over Red River. Smoke still hung over the streets, smelling of soot and gunpowder. But for the first time in many years, this smell did not bring fear. It was the smell of victory. The residents came out of their homes, carefully stepping over the ashes and charred boards. Someone was helping to put out the last of the fires. Someone was gathering the wounded. Someone was just looking at the sky, not believing that the town was still standing. And everyone knew last night, Red River had changed forever. A stranger who became one of their own. Jonathan Hayes was sitting by the well, bandaging his shoulder. His revolver, blackened with soot, lay nearby. People came up to him one by one. Some thanked him silently with their eyes. Some put a hand on his shoulder. Some offered to help. The old apothecary said, "You did what we've been afraid of our whole lives." The blacksmith added, "This town will stand now, thanks to you." Hayes only nodded. He didn't like words, but inside, he felt something for the first time that had long been lost. He belonged to the world again. Abigail had been walking around the town all morning, helping the wounded, handing out water, bandaging children. Her face was tired, but her eyes were shining. When she came up to Hayes, he looked up. She held out a fresh bandage to him and said quietly, "The town calls you a hero, but to me, you're just a man who didn't turn away." He wanted to answer, but he couldn't find the words. He only squeezed her hand. And in that gesture, there was more than in all the speeches. The town council in the afternoon, the residents gathered in the saloon. A lamp stood on the table, around which dozens of people were huddled. "The Claytons are dead," the elder began, But we need to decide how to live from now on, without fear. Voices hummed. Someone suggested choosing a new sheriff, someone else creating a council, and almost all eyes kept returning to Hayes. He must stay, someone in the crowd said. With a man like him, Red River will be safe. Jonathan stood up. I didn't seek power, and I'm not going to take it. The town must decide for itself who will be its guardian. Silence. Then Abigail got up. Maybe he didn't seek power, but he showed us what justice means. Isn't that what we should be learning? And the people nodded. The decision late that evening. Hayes was sitting by the stable, getting his horse ready. He was going to leave. He felt that his job was done. But suddenly, he heard footsteps. It was Abigail. She came up and stopped next to him. You want to leave again? She asked. He nodded. There's no place for me here. You're wrong, she said firmly. You gave us a chance to live differently, but you also gave yourself a chance. Why not take it? He looked into her eyes, and for the first time in many years, he understood maybe it was time to stop running. Epilogue. A month later, Red River came back to life. Trading returned to the streets. Children were running in the square again, and laughter sounded where there had only been darkness recently. The town got a new council, and for the first time, decisions were made together, not dictated by the Claytons. Hayes stayed. He didn't become the sheriff, but he was more respected than any authority. People knew, as long as he was here, no one would dare trample on their land again. And next to him, Abigail was always there. She didn't ask who he had been before. For her, only one thing was important: who he had become now. And when they were sitting by the fire in the evening, watching the sunset, Hayes said quietly, I guess I found a place where I can stay. Abigail smiled, and I knew it from the very beginning. The fire's flame was reflected in their eyes, and over Red River, true peace had reigned for the first time in many years.